There is an old Dutch saying which speaks of the city. Whenever you buy a shirt in Rotterdam, it comes up with the sleeves rolled up already. So this tells us something about our city. And I have to say, I'm a member of this community. I'm a proud member of this community. Because Rotterdam, what I like the most about this city is that it is an ever-changing city in an ever-changing world. So if I look at this, I was introduced as a taxi driver. I did drive a taxi for quite a long time. I've been city servant for quite a long time. The floating gypsy maybe needs something more. I lived on a ship, an old barge, for I think about 12 or 13 years. And I didn't have no steady place where I lived. I just wandered all over the place. So actually, I can say I know my city from up there to up there. Lately, I'm a storyteller. Well, not lately, I'm a storyteller now already for 20 years. And I started out to be a storyteller outside the city. I always worked in the city. I left the city, discovered my ability of telling stories. So I went over to another world. I went over to the Americas. And I found there some really nice thing I could make my money from. Then I came back to Rotterdam. And I said something like, why travel all the world? Why have a city full of stories over here? So I checked out my city. And then one day, somebody came up to me and he said, hey, Nico, something is going on in Heiplaat. And I said, Heiplaat? You don't want to be found dead in Heiplaat. I will show you where Heiplaat is. Over there. Is there anybody who knows Rotterdam who knows Heiplaat? Yeah, there's one of them. And actually, I came up there because they wanted to reconstruct the area. They had this dream 12 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, about thinking about Maasvlakte number 2. And then they had something like all the pink area, the orange area you see over here is containers. So when Maasvlakte number 2 is ready, all the containers will disappear out there. So we got this big, vast area we can reconstruct. And on the other hand, there was the four harbor area was empty too. So that's something like, you know, the city architect or something. Hey, we can make a whole new city center. And actually, this was a wild idea all over the place. And then I had something like, well, if they're going to do that, I'm going to live over there on that corner and start myself a bar. You know, then when I get old, I can tap some beer and I can tell stories for the rest of my life. So we moved into there. But before I'm going to tell you this story, I'm going to take you through the history of the city. And I'm going to try to do this within 7 minutes. So bear with me. Round about 1300, over there, push the right button, over here, started the city. Actually, there were some castles round about 1200. But we were near the sea, we were at the river, and we had no protection. So from time in a while, once in the 50 or 70 years or 100 years, there was a big storm. And then everything was faded away. So one day the Dutch government, at least what was the government in those days, said, we're going to build dikes. And they built dikes. And actually they started a dike from, what was Vlaardingen from here, all the way up to Gouda. And some dikes on the south side of the river too. And that's actually when they started over here, this little village. But there was already a community. There was a community of fishermen. There's always fishermen on the last bend of the river. And those two communities together, because there was a little river coming somewhere from here, they still don't know where it's really originated from. And it comes here, it's called the Rotte. And because they built a dike, they had to make a hole in the dike in order to get the water out to the big river. And that is what they called Rotterdam. And actually, it wasn't that big. It was small. It was some entrepreneurs. There were some farmers. There were some fishermen. There were some sailors, and there was what was known in those days, like, you know, they built a big wall around our settlement. And when night was falling down, you had to take care. You were inside those gates because outside were bad folk. So it didn't last very long before this little village almost grew out of his walls, out of his protection. And the people were looking at each other and said, how are we going to change this? Well, actually, I will tell you how they did change it. One night, there was this little aide, probably of a carpenter, who fell asleep, had too much to drink, turned himself over, threw a candle around, and half a city burned down. So this was opportunity. And the city council said, oh, we can build a new city. And this was actually when they... What did I do? Give me buttons, really. What I do was, you know, they created in those days what we call nowadays the city triangle. Because the thing was burned down, they had the opportunity to redo it. And they redid it. And actually, in those days, they had something like, well, we're going to be a city. So what we're going to do, we're going to build ourselves a church. And they started building a church. And actually, that church is still here nowadays. It's called the Lawrence Church. Maybe you see it when you do some sightseeing. Then remember, it originated from the 1300s. Actually, it took them 150 years to build a thing. But when they had made the city triangle, that's something like after 200 years, it's something, something is going wrong out here. We got to expand, and there's walls around. We cannot go any further. How do we do this? So another burn came in. Probably a ship's mate throwing a candle over. But half a city burned down. And after 2 years, it was revistated by the Spanish people. The Spanish people were over here. I'm talking about the 1500s now. And after that, they could reconstruct the thing again. And they built what we know as the inner city, as, you know, stuff like the Koolsingel. Used to be a harbor. And they dug the old harbor, what we nowadays know as an old harbor, was the first harbor in Rotterdam. And slowly it grew, craft and trade within the city. And then it lasted for another couple of 100 years, and they did good in the 1600s. You know, we had Delft over there. Delft founded Delfshaven, because it's over here, Delfshaven. Delft had a problem. Delft was the main city in the Netherlands. It's not for nothing the royal family is buried out there still. And Delft had something, well, what's happening in Rotterdam? Check it out. Check it out. So they founded Delfshaven. Later on, Delfshaven came in with Rotterdam, and then it grew out to be the biggest city. But it took on and it took on, and it couldn't grow anymore. And then came the Industrial Revolution. And it's something, oh, we're really growing now. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? How we come? How? And then there was one entrepreneur. And this entrepreneur said, well, you know, guys, if you want to grow, cross the river. I never thought about crossing the river before. Cross the river. Well, we cannot build a bridge which is that big. So, but you know, this entrepreneur kept on going and selling his plans, and then finally they crossed over. They dug this one, so they could make a big bridge over the river and a small bridge over here. So with a small bridge they could lever, so the ships with a mast could go through. And then, ladies and gentlemen, this was it. Because when they crossed over, I always say Rotterdammers learn to build, you know, with the rolled up sleeves. They're workers. And actually, the last development for the last 150 years I can do in 1 minute. Because they dug the harbors over here. They dug this one. This was the next one. This one they did in the 30s. This one they did in the 60s. Then this one, this was Botlek. They actually created in the 50s of the last century. And when this was full, they actually were creating, Europort was built in the 70s. And then was the second thing they thought about was Maasvlakte. Okay, we make the Maasvlakte in the 80s. So it didn't took them long to go over there. But what I left was, because everything was getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and taller and taller and taller. And it was built on profit. So remember this, just expansion, growth for profit. But when I left, because everything was getting bigger, this one got empty. This was a big shipyard. Actually, the SS Rotterdam was built over there. It was empty because shipbuilding, we don't do that anymore in Rotterdam. So Rotterdam, besides that it grew to be world port #1, it created its own problem. How do we solve this problem with these vast city areas just being empty? Well, the inner city had no problem at all. We can see around. Most of you know how the inner city is. We all know the pictures of Erasmus Bridge. We all know the pictures of the big buildings and growing and the modern city center. And lately we had the market hall. Everybody knows the market hall? Well, what I thought about when they built this stuff, I had something like, well, really nice. I like the buildings. But then I see when they started building Lawrence Church in the 1300s, and actually they built Market Hall next to it, but nothing changed. They had another way of building, but they still use bricks and concrete weighing 2.5 tons a cubic meter. Only thing what they learned is by technique we can build more beautiful. But it's not a different way of thinking. So I ended up over there. Push the right button. I ended up over there. And actually they had a story, we're going to redevelop the stuff. And we're going to listen to the inhabitants. There's this old shipyard, but actually they want to tear it down. Get rid of it. Build houses over there. Because when everything is gone over there. And actually, I've seen the drawings. That you can live in your apartment, 7 high, on Waalhaven. Looking at over the haven. And look at the guys sailing on their boards. And, having fun on the water. Well, try to get with a rowing boat on the river. I will give you 1 minute. And they will really take you off because it's dangerous to go there without an engine. They really wanted to change it. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be part of it. I think this is beautiful. And then things started. They gave me a house. I didn't have to pay rent for it because they want again going to tear it down. But they said to me, Nick, do something for the village. And I did. I started out, we heard it before this afternoon, I started out giving barbecues, getting to know the people. I started out giving barbecues for the stakeholders. And the stakeholders were, in this case, it was the city council. And it was the housing corporation, Woonbron. It was the harbor company. And they were all involved by the reconstruction of the area. And they were working on that for 2 years. And then came in the word sustainability. Well, this was new. And the stakeholders looked at each other and they said, well, sustainability. What the hell is sustainability? So actually, they used the word so much that it became a really nice adjective. Is it called? Yep. So actually, they didn't know what to do with it. And the city was giving them money because we were told a couple of times in 2015 we want to reduce the CO2. And 2020 we want to go back to our energy use. Oh, we're all going to do it over there, I think. So they started talking and they started talking and they started talking with the inhabitants and they started talking, getting in experts, getting in money, getting in government money. But they couldn't cope with it. What happened is that we as inhabitants, and I was really involved from the first day I was in there. I had something like, well, I'm going to be there, I'm going to have a lot of fun. And I did have a lot of fun. Make some money out of projects because there's projects all over the place. Make little money, but you know, in the due of the years, I grew out to be the mayor of this little village. Actually, I'm the representative of all the inhabitants out there, but they cannot do it. They do not understand what is sustainability. They tore down 300 of the 800 houses in there. They actually destroyed the community out there because people had to move out. What I did promise, this house is coming back. And because Heiplaat is not protected by dikes, they had to build outer dikes. This is not done. So they had to really adjust the law for that. That's as far as they went. But now, there comes the day, they have to start building. They don't have a clue. They have to go back to the electricity, the 2020 neutral norm. Well, that's one of the big electricity companies involved with it. And actually, we as inhabitants, we learned in the course of the years what it is to think sustainability, to think about sustainability, to think sustainable. And what's to think sustainable? It's very simple. People grew up there, worked all their life on the shipyard. They had kids. They want their kids to grow up there. And actually, I don't want to be a grandfather over there. And I always say, well, when you think sustainability, think about what the kids of your kids are going to need. And then you think sustainable. So we had this big electricity company over there working things out. We're gonna put solar systems on the roof and stuff like that. And then the inhabitants said, well, we got 100-year-old houses. You know, first insulate our houses before you think about solar panel on the roof. Because, you know, when in winter there is wind, I blow out of my house because of the draft. So take care of that first. And then we want to think with you, put the solar system on it. Now, we as inhabitants, as a group of inhabitants, there's a couple of entrepreneurs out there, we have our own energy system now. And actually, I brought it in to the stakeholders a couple of weeks ago. I said, well, we're working with this company, and we're going to do our own energy system. And if we do that, we can give all the verenigingen we have in the village, you know, the companies who take care of the people, the footballs, the main house, give them free electricity because they do something for the people. The guy from the big electricity company was there when I brought it in. He came up from his chair about 10 centimeters. He said, well, we're working on this for 2 years. And well, I said, you work on it for 2 years. You talk about it for 2 years. I had a discussion with managers. Take care if you're a manager within a company and something has to change. Stand up to your boss because maybe your boss set you in this job to think about it because he's not able. What I want to say, people, if you work for your community, got the guts to stand up for the kids of your kids.